lot of, I don't know, what is the word that I could use? A lot of feelings in the words that he reads, and that's why I absolutely enjoy listening to the recitation, even though whenever he makes a tajweed mistake, my mind just starts giving me red flags like, what are you doing? This is a mistake. Why did he do that? But we still we still enjoy. I very much enjoy. I think every single time I'm driving anywhere, I'm putting his recitation. All right. So Surah Ash-Shara, you guys, is the surah that we're actually going to be doing. Now, the fun thing about Surah Ash-Shara is that you're living in a story, but it's history repeating itself. You're really gonna enjoy it, I promise you. So Surah Ash-Shara is 227 ayat. Here we go, Surah Ash-Shara, and you can see with Surah Ash-Shara, it's actually in the middle of the Quran almost. It's juzu 19th juzu, and of course Surah Ash-Shara is one of those surahs that actually have short ayat. And one thing, Surah Ash-Shara is actually a Meccan surah. What does it mean to actually be a Meccan surah? A Meccan surah tells us that number one is that you're expecting short ayat. So why short ayat for Meccan surahs? Well, short ayat because people generally were not ready to listen. So you needed short messages in order to get that message out. That's one thing. And the other part is that with short ayat, you are more likely to get more said in shorter phrases. And of course, when we say Meccan Surah, this is also telling us that it was revealed before the Prophet ﷺ had migrated to Medina, which tells us that there was a certain context that surrounded the revelation of the surah. The context was there were lots of let's say anti-Muslim anti-Muslim sentiments that were surrounding the Muslims. The Muslims were still a very small minority. They did not have any power whatsoever. The Muslims were still facing execution at a time when they were just beginning in their Islam. The Muslims were not only a minority, but they were also not having any power or any authority at the time. Unlike in Medina, where they actually had some kind of power, some kind of political and slash military power that was still, yes, in its beginning, but it still meant that there was something that those that were opposing the Muslims were still going to be fearing. Unlike when they were in Mecca, they were really fleeing and literally fleeing for their life, in where they had to find a safe haven in Abyssinia at the time. So when we're looking at the Meccan time, in other words, before the migration to Medina, we're looking at a totally different circumstance, and we're seeing that the Muslims were wanting any type of support. So the support that they were getting were really, some of it was Surah Yusuf, some of it was Surah Ash-Shara right there, and other things. So really similar to our times today, in where those that hold on to Islam, and I want you guys to pay attention to this one, because those that hold on to Islam today are really seen as a very small minority. We're seen as a threat. And of course, those that I'm talking about holding on to Islam, and I'm not here talking about just the name Muslim. So if a lot of times we have within the Muslim community, we have a larger number of Muslims trying to, I would say, embrace the Western lifestyle, trying to fit in so that they don't feel that they are somehow a minority. So they would somehow combine an Islam and kufr lifestyle just to feel that they are still part of the community. But of course, Islam is always telling you, you got to be careful with that. That's not what you want to do. So let's see what Islam and what the Quran was actually then teaching the Muslims through the stories. And of course, at a time when the Muslims were a very, very small minority. In fact, they were just a very small handful of Muslims at the time. We're talking about the first 5, 6, 7 years. The Muslims were only about 35 Muslims in the whole wide world. And of course, you're talking about if you're not following their lifestyle, that is their tradition, their culture, their that set of community that was surrounding them, you're definitely not going to be just facing an opposition, but your life is also going to be under threat, because in a tribal community, you're most likely not going to find any type of support to protect your life, because that was the law at the time. The law at the time was really based on tribalism that was going to be the one to implement what it means to ensure your security. So if you were actually following a different tradition, a different lifestyle, you were most likely going to be finding no security, and therefore finding yourself deserted, finding yourself in under threat all the time, and finding yourself facing homelessness, facing probably even death threats, all those different things. And of course, the most important thing is that you're most likely going to see even what you're standing for, which you're already struggling to hold on to and trying to grow in your deen in. You're going to find yourself that even that part of you is right now under threat, and you're being pressured to give it up. So let's see what happened to Prophet Musa, because a lot of this is really similar to our times today. The surah starts with Ta, Sin, Mim. Just like all the different surahs that start with those beginning letters, those Ta, Sin, Mim, Alif, Lam, Mim, etc. Those are more, you will find those in the Meccan surahs as a way to bring about attraction, to say, hey, these surahs that are being recited at you are actually the same, from the same ayat. In other words, they're actually come from the same exact letters that you're hearing right now. And those are, whether it's Alif, Lam, Mim, and Ta, Sin, Mim, etc. And those actually come in the form of Ta, Sin, Mim, or Alif, Lam, Mim, certain common group of letters. There were some different interpretations, like for example, Ta, Sin, Mim. You had some scholars say, well, Ta stands for Turi Sinat, Sin stands for Alexandria, Iskandaria, Mim stands for Mecca. Actually, there's no evidence on that. Or some said actually Ta, Sin, Mim, each letter stands for one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which also really doesn't have any evidence to support it. And also some said, well, no, this is actually just telling you that this is the Quran. Again, no support to prove that, no evidence to support that as well. But in the end, is that these letters are actually the letters that you will find in the Quran. There are 14 letters in total, and of course, the 14 letters, the easiest way to remember them is in a form of connected letters together, instead of remembering them in those scrambled letters. Now, the other part is that when we actually speak about these letters, it's more to bring about attraction. It's more like a ringing bell that these are the letters that make up what you are hearing right now, the Quran. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين. Most of the times, whenever you see Ta, Sin, Mim or Alif, Lam, Mim, you're going to come across where it's reminding تلك آيات الكتاب, or this is the Quran. It's always reminding you, well, those are the letters that actually form the ayat, that actually form the Quran, that form the words that you're actually listening to right now. Tilka means those are the letters that form the Quran that you're reading, the ayat, the verses that you're listening to. Al-Kitab al-Mubin. Why did it actually say Al-Kitab al-Mubin? So Al-Kitab means the book. What book is it referring to? When you want to see the Al, this is the Al. There are two different types of Al. There's the Al that is called Al-Ahdiyya, in where it's referring to a specific type of an Al. It's but it's specifying and it's an inclusive al, or actually it's excluding other things, and it's actually telling you that it's exclusive al, and it's informing you about what really it's specifying here. Tilka ayatul kitab, it's specifically speaking about the Quran. And of course, tilka ayatul kitabil mubin, these are the sentences right there. In other words, the ayat that are the verses that are inside the Quran, and of course al-mubin to mean the clear ayat. There's no ambiguity about it. It's clear. The words are clear, and the words and the message in it is clear. لعلك باخع نفسك ألا يكونوا مؤمنين. Very equivalent to the ayat in Surah Al-Kahf, right? This one, لعلك باخع نفسك ألا يكونوا مؤمنين. And باخع نفسك, in where you're finding some kind of a burden when you're seeing that these people are distancing themselves away from believing. Why was the Prophet ﷺ feeling that? Well, just like anybody that is knowing what the truth is, but then people are leaving the message. People are attacking and accusing the Prophet ﷺ, of being a liar, etc. That was burdening the Prophet. That was making the Prophet ﷺ feel that distress. Now, it's really important when we're talking about that distress part, because we're going to see some things that are really similar to the other prophets that were also feeling this sadness, this sorrow, this anxiety, this distress, that people were actually rejecting, and of course returning back to their lifestyle even after hearing the words of Allah Almighty. إن نشأ ننزل عليهم من السماء آية فظلت أعناقهم لها خاضعين. What does that mean? So they were actually hearing the ayat. They were hearing the verses. They were hearing the signs that were containing the argument for them to believe, that were containing the argument to help them find the truth and the logic behind this world. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet ﷺ, إِن نَشَأْ, if we would have wanted to, we would have been capable of bringing something come down from the heavens, the skies, and it would be a miracle that their necks, and this is a metaphor, that their necks would have no choice but to submit to the truth. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have been capable, if He wanted to make and reveal a miracle that people would have no way to reject, and would have no way but to see the truth and to believe in the truth, and eventually to accept it as nothing that they could reject whatsoever. But, and here, when we look at فَظَلَّتْ أَعْنَاقُهُم, not only the individuals, but this is also talking about the leaders. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have been capable, if He wanted to bring about a miracle that not only would it let the layman believe, or the different people believe, but it would have been capable of forcing even the leaders to submit to the rule and to the power of the Lord Almighty. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave people the free will to choose to believe or disbelieve, and that's what they're going to be held accountable for. They're going to be held accountable for their ability, and also their choice, the choice that they made to believe or to reject. But at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold them accountable for it. وما يأتيهم من ذكر من الرحمن محدث إلا كانوا عنه معرضين. And every time, وما يأتيهم, in other words, the very common thing that people choose to do, وما يأتيهم, every single time, most of these people, every ayah, every evidence that comes to them, what happens? Every time they would get min dhikr min ar-Rahman, every time they would get a reminder min ar-Rahman. I want you to look at the word min dhikr min ar-Rahmani, muhdathin. Every time they would get a reminder from the Lord Almighty, min ar-Rahman, from ar-Rahman, muhdathan, in where it comes not now here muhdathan, it's not a new message per se, but it is more of a revival. It comes as a reminder. It revives the same exact message that the Lord Almighty had sent to mankind, but the same response you would get from the people. إلا كانوا عنه معرضين. They would be mu'aridin. The word mu'aridin actually means to turn back, to turn away, to deny. What is their response? Well, the response is that not only did they deny, they rejected totally, and then the same response, the same story happens again and again. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want to tell the Prophet ﷺ here? That the same response that the Prophet ﷺ is getting at the time was really the same response that the previous prophets actually had found and were encountered with before the Prophet ﷺ. In other words, the same exact response that you, when you want to give da'wah, the story began at the times before you, and the story continues to be the same during your time. In other words, you just make a part of the story. This is how the story began. How do you continue your part of the story? How do you continue the story of the da'wah? And then continues. وما يأتيهم من ذكر محدث من الرحمن من ذكر من الرحمن محدث إلا كانوا عنه معرضين. Whenever they would give a reminder, they would just reject, turn away. What happened? So here, semicolon, فقد كذبوا فسيأتيهم أنباء ما كانوا به يستهزئون. They had denied. In other words, before you they had denied. Before you they had rejected. Before they had claimed that it was just a lie. فسيأتيهم أنباء ما كانوا به يستهزئون. The فسيأتيهم means it will come to them. The story, the truth, the story and all the things that they were told, they were foretold was going to happen. It will come to them. It will be revealed. It will be clear to them, and all the things that they were ridiculing, they will find it to be the truth that will come right before their eyes. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. Now this is I want you to look at this connection. Now remember, let me zoom out right here because we need to see a number of different connections here. All right, so here we go. So before, it was actually telling you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he would have wanted to send down a miracle from the heavens where people, even their leaders, would have no choice but to believe in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then brings another type of miracle. In other words, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have wanted a miracle that they would no way whatsoever think or have any choice to reject, he would have done so. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them a different kind of a miracle that they would have to use to see. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. What miracle is that? Do they not see? And here, when you look at يَرَوْا, able to see, the eyes to be able to see. I think I mentioned the story before when I went to my professor and I said, how come I made the dua to get a miracle just like Bani Israel, and to get a miracle just like the other nations, and I never got that miracle? And then he said, can't you see the sun? Can't you see the moon? Can't you see the skies? Can't you see the seas? Can't you see all that? And I said, no, I want a real miracle. And then he responded, فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور. It's not that the miracles don't exist. It's that the hearts may be sealed from seeing the miracles that surround us. And that's the same thing. In where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the miracles are already surrounding the people. Do they not see the earth and all the different... Still, he didn't talk about the heavens. He just said, you know what? Even if you don't look up, look just around you. Do they not see on earth? And how many of من كل فيها كم أنبتنا فيها من كل زوج كريم, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala planted in it من كل زوج كريم, from plants and from different kinds. So here zawj is not only pairs, but in the different and the different kinds and the many different kinds of plants. Not one, but you will have different kinds of different apples and different pears and different... You've got the Danjo pears and I think I forgot the Bartlett, I think, pears, and the apples, Granny Smith and the Washington and the Fuji and the Pink Lady. All these different kinds of apples and different kinds of tomatoes and all those different produce. Well, all those different kinds, and each one has a different taste, and there's so many different kinds that you see in front of you. من كل زوج كريم, and it is abundant. In other words, just look into what you're eating, look into what you're walking on, look into what contains you, which is earth. All that is just needing one thing from you. Open your eyes to see that the miracles actually encompass you. They're actually underneath you and up above you, and you're actually a miracle yourself. إن في ذلك لآية. You want a miracle? Well, in that, in what? ذلك, this is one of the miracles for you to see. In that there is a miracle. وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Yet most people, they will not believe. Why? Because they are so busy. They are so busy and pacified with all the different surfaces of life. The surface of life, they're only looking to food as the pleasure. They'll only look into their own existence as probably the pleasure of reproduction and forget to see the miracle in what makes life. They're focused on the surface of life and not the deep miracle of what made life and the purpose that preceded life. وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ. What is that reminding us of? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent us all the different evidence to prove His existence, and وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ, وَإِنَّ, and verily, for you to remember that the Lord Almighty, yes, sent you signs and different evidence for you to believe in the Lord Almighty, but وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ, and verily your Lord Almighty, Al-Aziz, He's not in need, not for your worship and not for anything else's worship. And He's a Rahim. He is all merciful. Why all merciful? In other words, Al-Ubudiyya, and you submitting to your Lord Almighty, is really for your sake. How is it for your sake? Well, it's for your sake because your Lord Almighty, part of your creation, your Lord Almighty made your free will really choose to reject or to accept. But your free will is really to help you decide, are you going to accept what is actually best for you, or are you going to accept what is not best for you, but what you might think as evident, as some might use as evidence, that if it makes me feel the pleasure, it is good for me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, well, your Lord Almighty is not really in need for your worship. It is actually you in need for that worship, because it is actually for your sake. So how is it for my sake? Why is it for my sake? Well, you as a human being, you were created with certain needs. Part of those needs are the needs of existence. There are certain things that your existence fully needs and fully is fully based on, such as eating and drinking. You cannot stop yourself from eating and drinking because your own survival, you feel it. If you stop eating, you will feel your stomach growling. You're going to feel the pinch of hunger, thirst. You're going to feel the dryness of thirst in your throat. You're going to feel that there is something pushing you to go for that need for existence. But there's one thing. When many times people don't realize it, there's another type of thirst. It's the spiritual thirst. The spiritual thirst in you is what usually people forget. Why do they forget that spiritual thirst? Because they're focused as animals on their existence thirst, on what makes them exist, and forget the main purpose for their existence. The main purpose for their existence is really preceding their own existence. It came before their own existence. Before their own existence, their spirituality was really the first focus. What is spirituality? The connection that they're supposed to be connecting with their Lord Almighty. Think of this. When you look at the purpose of your eyes, before your eye was even created, the idea of sight was the main thing that your sight was created for. The idea of sight preceded. Same thing when we're looking at the purpose that you connect with your Lord Almighty, the purpose that you were actually created for in this world. That purpose is that you would connect with the main purpose, that you were created for, which is why and where am I going in this world. وَإِذْ نَادَى رَبُّكَ, your Lord Almighty called on to when your Lord Almighty called on to Musa, أَنِ ائْتِ الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ, go to the group of people that had oppressed themselves. What group of people that oppressed themselves? And what did they do? Why talk about them oppressing themselves? Well, remember, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talked about the main purpose of our own existence, is that there is a law that actually brings you pleasure. The law is there are certain things that you need to cover, you need to fulfill. The spiritual need is number one. Your life need, which is your existence and the existence of your life and your family and etc., and chastity and reproduction. And number four, which is your mind and etc., and what makes you be able to make sense of your existence, which is اطلع برا. When we're looking at those different things that make up your own life, that make up the different factors to make stability in your life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of how the same type of arguing about the truth came from Prophet Musa's group of people that were trying to deny the truth. وَإِذْ نَادَى رَبُّكَ, when your Lord Almighty called on to Prophet Musa, أَنِ ائْتِ الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ, go to the people that oppressed themselves. How did they oppress themselves? Well, they did two things. Number one is that the Pharaoh actually claimed to be God himself. Because of that, he actually considered that all people have to follow him and all people have to declare him as God, and that people's forces, people's energy must be all going to glorifying the Pharaoh himself. And because of that, he enslaved the people of Bani Israel. What did they do? He said, so who are the Qawm al-Zalimin? Here we go. Explains it. قوم فرعون, it is the people of the Pharaoh. ألا يتقون, do they not have taqwa? And I want you guys to remember, when we're looking at taqwa, this is not speaking about only as considerate over social and social fairness and social justice. This is not only focused on social justice here, but this is actually focused first on tawheed. And when we're talking about social justice, so people might think, oh, Prophet Musa alayhi salam worked and did all this just to protect the children of Israel from slavery. That's not the only thing. Prophet Musa alayhi salam's main mission was to bring tawheed and not social justice. So أَلَا يَتَّقُونَ, there's no way that you can bring social justice if you don't actually have the main idea, the main center of what makes justice. What is justice based on? Justice is not based on my own inclination or my own view or what people think is justice, but it's actually based on Allah Almighty declaring what justice is, defining what justice is. And we're living in a time where everyone's speaking about social justice, and of course, defining that social justice as if right now all of a sudden the West has come to the final definition of what social justice is, and of course right now going into the takhabbut, and I would say all these different confusions of making and claiming to bring about social justice. But here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that social justice is really how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines it. Where when the center is distant away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then people are going to go into confusion of what makes justice. Continues. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to go to Qawm Fir'aun. Why? Because أَلَا يَتَّقُونَ, do they not yet see the reminder that they must have that religious integrity, the integrity that is based on Allah Almighty and is not based on the definition of Fir'aun, the Pharaoh, and is not based on the ruler himself to define what social justice and what economical prosperity looks like. قال ربي إني أخاف أن يكذبون. Now Prophet Musa alayhi salam says, "O my Lord Almighty, I fear that they might deny and reject." In other words, he was afraid that they were going to respond by just rejecting, and وَيَضِيقُ صَدْرِي, and that he understands himself and he says وَيَضِيقُ صَدْرِي, and I worry that وَيَضِيقُ صَدْرِي. I worry that my chest, my heart, I will have this anxiety. Here, يَضِيقُ صَدْرِي, it's a metaphor that he worries that I'm afraid that because of the distress that it might have when they would reject and deny my words, that it would affect my ability to speak and my ability to be loud and clear and eloquent in proving the point. فَأَرْسِلْ إِلَى هَارُونَ. Send my brother Harun. Why? Because in another ayah, he explained that Prophet Harun alayhi salam was actually more eloquent than Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Prophet Musa alayhi salam was worried that the distress of their denial might affect his ability to pronounce and even be eloquent in sounding the truth. وَلَهُمْ عَلَيَّ ذَنْبٌ فَأَخَافُ أَن يَقْتُلُونَ. And I fear. Now this is really important. So Prophet Musa alayhi salam was worried about two things. Number one is that because of their rejection, that he might actually become distressed from them. And he also worries another thing. وَلَهُمْ عَلَيَّ ذَنْبٌ. There's a certain dhanb. There's a certain past dhanb, a past mistake that I had done with them. And I want you to look at the word dhanb. When you look at the word dhanb, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, what was the dhanb that was committed? Prophet Musa alayhi salam was between, between the pharaohs and between the city and the people in the city, and a guy from Qibt, the Coptics. The Coptics here is not referring to the religious Christian denomination, the Copts in Egypt, but this is actually referring to the Copts. It's a tribe, the Copts in Egypt. And there were the children of Israel, the children of Bani Israel, that were enslaved by the Pharaoh to be the workers and the laborers. All right. But there was a dispute between one of the children of Israel and one of the Copts, in other words, from the tribe that was considered as the noble tribe in the Pharaoh fortress, or in the Pharaoh kingdom. Prophet Musa alayhi salam sees how the Coptic guy, the Coptic man, was somehow attacking and somehow taking advantage of the slave from Bani Israel. Prophet Musa alayhi salam pushes the Coptic man, from attacking the slave guy from the children of Israel, and the guy drops dead. Which guy drops dead? The Coptic guy drops dead. The Coptic guy, think of it as the noble guy from the soldiers of the soldiers of the Pharaoh, drops dead just from a slight push to push him away from that slave of children of Bani Israel. The guy drops dead. Prophet Musa alayhi salam, is anyways from the children of Israel, is really later discovered after his mom had put him in that bassinet and puts him in the river. Prophet Musa alayhi salam ends at the shore of the castle of the king himself. So what does he say? فَأَخَافُ أَن يَقْتُلُونَ. I had committed a past crime. Crime, according to the law of the Pharaoh, that was a crime. According to the law of the Pharaoh, to kill one of his soldiers is a crime, and therefore he was going to take revenge for it. So Prophet Musa alayhi salam is saying, well, I'm afraid that past crime is going to be brought forth, and they're going to put it as this ace card in front of me and say, well, we've got a good reason to reject the call of da'wah that you're doing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here tells us he wasn't afraid for his life. He was afraid that they might reject the words of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and that when they try or attempt to kill him, that might actually bring an end to the message that Prophet Musa alayhi salam is trying to put forth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kalla. The word kalla means absolutely not. Absolutely not. That should not be a fear, Musa. Don't worry about the message, and don't worry about the message being brought or terminated. But the message shall be put in victory. Don't worry about that. That is your Lord Almighty to bring victory to it. فَذْهَبَا. Just worry about one thing. Do you the orders of your Lord Almighty. فَذْهَبَا. So here, semicolon, فَذْهَبَا بِآيَاتِنَا. Go and take the words, take the message, take them. The mission is really take the words of your Lord Almighty. إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ مُسْتَمِعُونَ. Now the word inna is actually plural. Inna is plural. You might think, I thought the Lord Almighty is one. Yet the Lord Almighty is one. But when you see the word inna, remember, it's going to be related to the names and attributes of Allah Almighty. So the word mustami'un is plural, and the word inna is plural. That's because it relates the names and attributes of Allah Almighty, and it gives and reflects the glorification. Unlike when the words, for example, inni ana, and then ana rabbul alameen, I am Rabbul Alameen, you will find it as singular when it relates to the name of the Lord Almighty. But when it relates to an attribute, a sifa, it's going to be in the form of plural to reflect glorification to the Lord Almighty. Mustami'un. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we are there listening to you. Not we to mean that there's more than one God, but this is actually speaking about the attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's relating to the sifa, it's relating to the description of the Lord Almighty, and this is to relate to that. The description of the Lord Almighty is glory, is in glory, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listening to that conversation, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, and therefore Prophet Musa alayhi salam should not worry about any fear, or should not worry about being left alone in the presence of this Pharaoh. فَأْتِيَا فِرْعَوْنَ. And here, فَأْتِيَا فِرْعَوْنَ. Then go to the Pharaoh. فَقُولَا. And say, إِنَّا رَسُولُ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. With all your confidence. Inna, say, we are messengers of the Lord Almighty, Rabbil Alameen. Here, Rabbil Alameen, the Lord of all the nations, the Lord of all the different nations, regardless whether it's the nations of plants, the nations of animals, the kingdoms of animals, the kingdom, planet kingdom, human kingdom, jinn kingdom, all those different nations. The Lord Almighty is telling Prophet Musa alayhi salam, say, we are, that is, Musa and Harun, we are both here, messengers for the Lord Almighty. And arsil ma'ana bani Israel. We have come to you to send with us Bani Israel, to send with us, to give us the children of Bani Israel. We have a mission to go to. We have a mission. We have come with a mission, and we have a mission that is to take Bani Israel and go on with the mission with that. قَالَ أَنَا أَمْرُ رَبِّكَ فِينَا وَلِيدًا. Here, the Pharaoh responds, wait a minute. Aren't you the one that we brought up when you were a child. You were amongst us. You were a little baby amongst us. وَلَبِثْتَ فِينَا مِنْ عُمُرِكَ سِنِينَ. And you stayed for a couple of years in your early childhood, and even when you grew older, you were brought up and you grew up in our fortress. وَفَعَلْتَ فَعْلَتَكَ الَّتِي فَعَلْتَ وَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And you did that sin. Remember that sin that you committed that crime that you committed when you were in the fortress? وَأَنْتَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. And you are nothing but somebody that denies all the gratitude and the favor that you were given. What did Fir'aun actually do? He wanted to reject by saying two things. Did he answer the question? He didn't answer the question. Did he actually respond? He didn't even respond to the words. He just wanted to say, wait a minute, you're going against my orders here. Why? Because the Pharaoh considered himself as the center for this whole kingdom, and therefore anyone that goes against his will and his power and against worshiping the Pharaoh. Now, the Pharaoh was actually considered as the god according to the people within that kingdom. And that's why the Pharaoh himself was actually considering that anybody that goes against working for him is somehow deserving to be punished, because he had then went against doing the right thing. So anything that goes against the favor of the Pharaoh or the Pharaoh's favor is actually considered as going against what is right. So the Pharaoh is the one that defines what it means to be a good citizen, and the Pharaoh considered that if whatever you're doing is not for the sake of the Pharaoh, is somehow not being a good citizen. And the Pharaoh himself considers, well, you're supposed to be part of those that are bringing the favors and that are doing good for the king himself, that is the Pharaoh. And here he says, well, remember, you're here standing in front of me when I actually let you live in my fortress, in my kingdom. And remember, I was the one that actually brought you and gave you a good life and gave you the ability and the advantage to actually live in my fortress. In other words, you should be working for me. You should be living and glorifying me as the king. And not only that, but وَفَعَلْتَ فَعْلَتَكَ. And not only that, but you even went against my own kingdom and all the different things that I stand for, which is that all this army and all these soldiers and all these slaves were all supposed to be working for me. But instead, you actually went against me by killing one of my soldiers. Now, he actually thought that he can prove and let Prophet Musa alayhi salam feel that worry and that fear. So Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he says, yes, and I did it. And yes, I killed one of your soldiers. If you're trying to use that as an argument to let me feel afraid, well, yes, I'll stand up and I'll tell you that, yes, I killed that soldier of yours. وَأَنَا مِنَ الضَّالِّينَ. And according to you, I'm nothing but a criminal. I'll let that point. To you, I'm a criminal. So therefore, to you, if you find me as a criminal, then so it be. But then, فَفَرَرْتُ مِنْكُمْ. What did he want to say? It's like, you can't even put that as an argument on me, because I'm not even following your rules. I'm not even following your laws. I don't even consider myself as part of your own people, to be one of those that regard you as the Lord. فَفَرَرْتُ مِنْكُمْ لَمَّا خِفْتُكُمْ. I ran away from you when I was in fear. فَوَهَبَ لِي رَبِّي حُكْمًا وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. But the Lord Almighty had granted me, had gifted me hukman. Here, hukman, it means, the word literally means rule, but it also means power. The Lord Almighty gave me the power. What power? The power to be the prophet. وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. And made me be the prophet, and made me be a messenger. وَتِلْكَ نِعْمَةٌ تَمُنُّهَا عَلَيَّ أَنْ عَبَّدْتَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. And are you here? Now here Prophet Musa alayhi salam responds to that when he said, hey, you actually killed one of our soldiers, and here you're coming to me and telling me to obey you, and coming to me and telling me to listen to what you're saying. Now Prophet Musa alayhi salam, with all the power, says, وَتِلْكَ نِعْمَةٌ تَمُنُّهَا عَلَيَّ. And that's a favor that you want to actually bring to me, and therefore telling me that it's a favor that you had given me. Remember, I wouldn't have been needing even to be in your own fortress if only you did not enslave the Bani Israel. Why did my mom even need to throw me in the sea? The only reason why she threw me in the sea was to protect me from the brutality that you were committing. So now you're telling me about a favor that you did for me? You didn't realize that the only reason why my mom threw me was really because you were killing all the children that were born, and all the children that were alive at the time. قال فرعون وما رب العالمين. Now he didn't respond to that when Prophet Musa alayhi salam responded to all his claims. So what does he say? He responds, all right. It's like he didn't even respond to that. He said, وما رب العالمين. All right. So who's the Lord of the worlds that you're talking about here? قال رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إن كنتم موقنين. So now, he said, after Fir'aun, he didn't respond when he saw that Prophet Musa alayhi salam was responding to his words. He said, وَمَا رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Said, okay, so who's the Lord of the world here that you're talking about? He said, the Lord of the heavens and the earth and everything that is in between them. In other words, he's redefining what it means to be a king, what it means to be a lord, because the Pharaoh was actually defining that he was the Lord, somehow connected to God, and that people were supposed to be worshiping him. Now, I want to look at the word here, hukman, in where Prophet Musa alayhi salam was telling him, just when you thought that you were the one to have the right to rule, Allah Almighty gave me the real authority, which is prophethood, which is truth. So then Prophet Musa alayhi salam tells him the definition of lordship, the definition to be a god, is that the Lord Almighty, the true Lord Almighty, is the Lord of the worlds, the Lord of the heavens, the Lord of the earth, and what is in between them. In other words, what makes a Lord is really the one that created the existence of the universe itself, including earth and including what is in between. In kuntum muqinin. In kuntum muqinin. Why in kuntum muqinin? Because the people that were worshiping the Pharaoh and everyone that was listening to this argument knew that there's absolutely no way that the Pharaoh contained the earth, the heavens, and what is in between them. There definitely was some skepticism. They definitely were not sure. Yes, he probably had. They didn't necessarily believe that he was God, but they actually worshipped him as a god because they thought that he had some kind of that he was anointed by God Almighty, and that's why he had some kind of a privilege that people needed to worship him. قال لمن حوله ألا تستمعون. Now I want you guys to listen to this. Now the Pharaoh is not responding to any of this. What is the Pharaoh doing? قال لمن حوله ألا تستمعون. Did the Pharaoh respond when Prophet Musa alayhi salam said, well, the real God is really the God and the Lord of the heavens and the earth and what was in between them. Now the Pharaoh says to the people around him, ألا تستمعون? Can't you listen to what this guy is saying? Prophet Musa, قال ربكم ورب آبائكم الأولين. What did the Pharaoh try to do? Did he actually respond like to the real definition of to what makes a god? He didn't. Now he's trying to use a different tactic, and this is in philosophy or in debate. All right, in debate, when you're not responding to the question, but you're actually going into a different topic. Here, the Pharaoh is going to a different topic. Prophet Musa alayhi salam is redefining what it means to be God and what is God. And the Pharaoh then wants to use a different tactic in where he wants to bring fear into their hearts. He says, do you guys see what this guy's talking about? What is he doing? He's using the method of ridicule. And that's the same type of method that a lot of the atheists use. The atheists, for example, they will say, they'll mock religions, they'll mock deity, they'll mock God, and they'll mock all the different things. Do they really have an answer? But they'll use the form of mockery in order to belittle you, in order to seem somehow with their pride that they actually have an answer, or that they actually have some kind of a power and confidence. But the reality is they don't even have an answer to anything. They're fighting, or let me say, they are arguing about something that they don't really have an answer to. But the form that the way that they use, the tactic that they use in order to make you feel that lack of confidence in what you stand for, they'll start mocking you. They'll start putting you down. And then without you realizing, it's a psychological tactic where you would think that they have something by looking at their pride. So here, the Pharaoh is using the same exact tactic that he used against them, which is to bring fear in their hearts by ridiculing Prophet Musa alayhi salam. ألا تستمعون? Look at him. Now he's mocking Prophet Musa. ألا تستمعون? Can't you listen to this man and what he's saying? Prophet Musa alayhi salam comes in with that same confidence and emphasizes and says the same exact words. قال ربكم ورب آبائكم الأولين. He's not only your Lord, but he's also the Lord of all your fathers and those ancestors and those generations that had actually passed even before you. In other words, I'm not only talking about you now, but I'm actually talking to Lord Almighty. Not only does he encompass what you see in front of you and the creation that you see in front of you, but even encompasses, and he's even the Lord of time. And this is really important. The Lord of the things that you see in front of you. In other words, the materialistic things that are in front of you, the creations that you see in front of you, and even what makes this creation tact, which is time and the energy that puts it all together. What made you and even made your ancestors. قال إن رسولكم الذي أرسل إليكم لمجنون. What does the Pharaoh respond? He says, you know what? The prophet that came to you and the prophet that was sent to you is nothing but a lunatic. لمجنون. He's nothing but a lunatic. Did he respond to anything? No. He wanted to use some type of a PR force, just like in the media. Not necessarily responding to Sharia, but let's just ridicule Sharia. Let's ridicule the Muslims. Let's claim that they are a threat to trying to take over people's freedom and trying to take over people. And that's the same thing that here the Pharaoh is trying to say. The prophet is nothing but a lunatic. Did he actually respond to anything? No, he just wanted to, again, use this type of stereotypical image to make the people afraid of him and to make it seem like he doesn't even have an argument. To make it seem, when the Pharaoh wants to say that he's Majnun, he wants to claim that he has that he has the logic. And this is really important to say, is that sometimes to claim that somebody doesn't have any logic, they will just accuse you of being majnoon, the opposite. And that, in other words, they'll accuse you of being crazy or a lunatic in order to claim that they have the logic. And that's the same thing. They'll accuse you of being oppressed in order to claim that they are free. They'll accuse you of being a threat in order to claim that they are bringing civilization to the world. They'll accuse you of being a danger in order to claim that they are bringing security. They'll accuse you of being backwards in order to claim that they actually contain bringing future to people. And that's the same exact thing. It's a stereotypical image that will be used against you in order to claim the opposite, and that they actually contain the opposite. قال رب المشرق والمغرب وما بينهما إن كنتم تعقلون. Continues Prophet Musa alayhi salam with the same confidence. He says he is the Lord of the East and the West, and what is in between them. إن كنتم تعقلون. Because he claimed that he accused him of being a lunatic. He says, in kuntum taqilun. Well, he's taking away that argument. He says, well, if you can think about it, if you just use a little bit of logic here, he's actually the Lord. The Lord Almighty is supposed to be the Lord of the East and the West and what is in between them. قال لئن اتخذت إلها غيري. Then he says, now, the same exact tactic that Pharaoh uses. If you take another Lord other than me, what does he do? When he realized that he couldn't use an argument of logic to prove Prophet Musa wrong, then he uses another force. The force is, well, if you take another God other than me, لَأَجْعَلَنَّكَ مِنَ الْمَسْجُونِينَ. I'm going to imprison you. What is now going to be the tactic? The first tactic was trying to ridicule and use some PR relations in order to put down Prophet Musa alayhi salam, in order to convince the masses that this man is actually nothing. But then when the Pharaoh realizes that tactic, the PR relations, the media and to convince the masses is not working anymore, then he uses tactic number 2, which is to instill fear. Now going military. If you take another God other than me, the second tactic is to bring about fear. I will imprison you. I will say that you are nothing but terror. I will put in all the different evidence to prove that you are nothing but a danger, and therefore I will have the right to take away your humanity by accusing you of being a criminal, and therefore will actually have the only right to imprison you, torture you, and then Prophet Musa alayhi salam says, didn't I bring you enough evidence and clear evidence to show you truth? قال فأتي به إن كنت من الصادقين. And you know what? Bring me the evidence that you're talking about. What evidence? We'll talk about that next week, inshallah. We'll talk about the miracles of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. But we're going to continue with the story, but I want you guys to recognize the similarities between our time and the tactics that was used in the Pharaoh's time is really the same. You will be accused because of your hijab. You're backwards. Look at you. You're supposed to be free. And what you don't realize is that these people are really empty of even the basic principle the basic definition of what it means to be free, the basic in the center and the reality of definition. It's all about redefining the definitions. And just like the Pharaoh, redefined what it means to be God, redefined what it means to commit a crime, redefined what it means to do right and wrong. And without you realizing, you are living in the same type of world where people are redefining what it means to be free, what it means to be right, what it means to be a criminal, what it means to be so many different things. And without you realizing, many would actually feel afraid to stand confident and stand strong and say, wait a minute, so why did you have the right to redefine it? And why isn't it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's supposed to be redefining things? Don't lose your confidence when people will stereotype you in order to be afraid. Stand strong, just like Prophet Musa alayhi salam. Don't succumb to redefinition of people that is based on either one, hawa, which is all those inclinations in the lobbies out there, or succumb to the different so-called studies said when they're all based on speculation. Stand up and be confident when you want to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, La ilaha illallah, and when you want to say Allahu Akbar. Stand strong and be confident, just like Prophet Musa alayhi salam here. Don't shaken by all the threats that you will be that you will be painted with in the media, or the different fears that people will try and attempt to put in your hearts to let you shaken when you stand up to practice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. All right. This is it for today, you guys. Inshallah, we'll continue. My kids are clapping. I guess they liked it. All right. So, let's see. Somebody says, let's see right there. I noticed you used the word Coptic for the Egyptian soldier. What Coptic means? Isn't that the name? So no, I did mention that. No, Coptics are actually tribes that used to live in Egypt, or they still do, but they later became Christian, and right now it is known as, the Coptic denomination for Christian group. But Coptic, it does not mean whatsoever. It doesn't mean Christian. The word Coptic does not mean Christian. It doesn't mean that denomination. The denomination that is known as Christian today is Coptic is actually the Egyptian tribes that were living in Egypt. All right, so if anybody would like to say anything before we log out, go ahead, or any questions or any corrections, I'd be happy to listen to that. Go ahead.
There's a question.
Hudhaifa has a question?
No.
No, all right. Inshallah. Yeah, well, I enjoy storytelling very much. And I'm gonna try to make this surah, inshallah, be that type of storytelling to help people. Yeah, I'm still recording. So inshallah, yes, this will be available, inshallah. All right, so everyone, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakumullah khairan for listening.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله